At 4:17 in the morning, a lookout on a merchant ship in the northern Indian Ocean leaned over the rail and saw a black column of smoke rising into the pale light. Not far off, something large was burning low in the water. Metal popped in the heat. A siren wailed once, then cut out. The sea smelled like fuel and hot paint. Hours earlier, Iranian commanders had still been talking like they owned the map. They were threatening to choke off the Strait of Hormuz, that narrow strip of water the global economy breathes through every single day. Oil, gas, chemicals, food supply chains. All of it squeezed through one corridor. Tehran believed it had a knife to the world's throat. Then the knife slipped. Because this story is not really about a navy getting beaten. That part was fast. Brutal, yes, but fast. This story is about a regime making the oldest strategic mistake in the book, confusing a threat with actual control. Iran believed it could turn geography into power and power into immunity. It could not. And once the first ships started running south, toward India, toward Sri Lanka, toward anywhere that was not home, the ending was already there. You could hear it in the radio traffic. Short transmissions, sharp turns, engines push too hard. Pull up a map. Don't zoom out. Stay tight on that thin stretch of water between Iran and Oman. At its narrowest, the Strait of Hormuz is just over 30 kilometers wide. That's it. 2 shipping lanes in, 2 out, each only a few kilometers across. Everything else is buffer or danger. Now imagine traffic, not cars, tankers. 70, sometimes 80 massive vessels moving through every day. Each one carrying millions of barrels of oil or liquefied gas. Engines rumbling low and constant. Crews watching radar screens in dim-lit bridges. Slow turns. No room for error. Roughly 20% of the world's oil passes through here. Not important, not significant, essential. You close Hormuz even briefly, and prices don't rise gradually. They spike. Supply chains don't bend. They snap. Iran has known this for decades. And after 1988, after Operation Praying Mantis, when the US Navy dismantled much of Iran's conventional fleet in a single day, Iran stopped trying to compete head-on. No more building a navy to match destroyers and carriers. That fight was already lost. Instead, they went underground, literally. Along the Iranian coastline, the terrain shifts quickly from water to rock. Jagged cliffs, dry mountains. Hidden in that geography are tunnels, reinforced storage sites, launch platforms carved into the earth. You don't see them from a passing ship. You don't even see them clearly from satellite unless you know exactly what you're looking for. Inside those spaces, anti-ship missiles, mobile launchers, drone systems, radar nodes. Tools designed not to win a battle, but to make the battlefield unlivable. That was the doctrine, not dominance, denial. And on paper it works. You don't need to sink every ship. You just need to make insurers panic, make captains hesitate, make markets react. So, when Iranian officials stepped in front of cameras and said the strait would be closed, when they issued that blunt challenge, "Come and test us," they weren't bluffing in the usual sense. They believed the system they had built over years could hold. But here's where the problem starts. Because threatening the strait is one thing, actually controlling what happens inside it under pressure, with multiple actors, incomplete information, and global consequences, that's something else entirely. And Iran didn't just apply pressure, it applied it everywhere, at once, without precision. That's where things began to break. The first strikes didn't look strategic, they looked messy. A tanker takes a hit near the stern. Fire crawls along the deck. Crew abandons ship in lifeboats that scrape against steel as they drop. Another vessel reports a near miss, then another. Radio chatter spikes. Too many voices, not enough clarity. 17 ships. That number matters, not because of the damage alone, but because of what it signals. Loss of control. Iran's doctrine depends on precision under chaos, hit selectively, create fear without triggering total war. That balance is fragile, and they lost it early. Because once civilian ships start burning, Thai, European, neutral flags, it stops being a regional dispute. It becomes a global crisis. Insurance companies don't debate geopolitics. They withdraw coverage. Captains don't wait for clarification. They reroute or stop. And they did, fast. Within 48 hours, traffic through Hormuz didn't slow. It collapsed. Tankers anchored outside the Gulf. Hundreds, then over 1,000 vessels sitting still in open water. Engines idling. Crews waiting, watching. Oil markets reacted exactly as expected. Sharp spike, volatility, governments scrambling to assess reserves. So on paper, Iran's economic play worked at first. But here's the flaw. They didn't isolate the pressure. They flooded the system. They hit a Russian-linked LNG carrier. That's not just collateral damage. That's strategic self-sabotage. Russia isn't a neutral bystander in this equation. It's a partner. Diplomatic cover, military cooperation. You hit their assets even by mistake, and you introduce friction where you can't afford it. That one strike told everyone something uncomfortable. Iran's command and control in the Strait was not as tight as advertised. And Washington noticed. Now shift perspective. U.S. planners were never worried about Iranian warships. Not really. Those ships are visible, trackable, predictable. They move. They emit signals. They sit in ports. They can be hit. What matters, the real threat, is on land. Hidden, hardened, dispersed. But you don't start there. You start with the easy layer. Because removing the surface fleet does two things immediately. It strips Iran of mobility at sea. It removes distractions while you prepare for the harder fight. So the response came in waves. Not dramatic, not loud in the way people imagine war. More calculated. Ports first, fuel depots, maintenance yards, dry docks, command nodes. Steady. Ships at anchor, large, slow, exposed. Cruise missiles came in low. Submarines launched from distance. Aircraft from carrier groups pushed strikes inland and along the coast. Then came follow-ups. Anything that moved, anything that tried to leave. Because here's something critical. Ships don't vanish, not in modern oceans. Not when surveillance is layered. Satellite, signal intercept, maritime tracking. Those Iranian vessels returning from exercises in the Indian Ocean, they were already being watched. The moment escalation crossed a certain threshold, those ships were no longer returning assets. They were targets in transit, and transit is vulnerability. One of them turns south, changes course, increases speed. Too late. A submarine doesn't rush. It waits, calculates. Then one shot. No spectacle, no warning. Just a break in the surface, and then nothing. That matters less for the ship itself and more for the message. Distance is not safety. The others understood immediately. They didn't fight, they diverted. India, Sri Lanka. Foreign ports that suddenly had a problem they didn't ask for. Crews offloaded, ships held, quietly, officially detained. That's how naval power collapses in real time. Not always in explosions, sometimes in reroutes and denied entry. Back in the Gulf, the remaining vessels faced a narrower set of options. Stay and be hit, run and be tracked, hide and hope. Some tried to blend into commercial traffic, turn off identification, mimic tanker routes, join what analysts call the shadow fleet. But that network isn't invisible. It's monitored precisely because it exists. Patterns give you away, speed profiles, movement behavior, communication gaps. And once identified, you're back on the board. More strikes followed, not all public, not all confirmed, but enough. Within days, Iran's visible naval capability wasn't just degraded, it was fractured beyond coordination. And here's the key point. That didn't end the threat. Not even close. Because everything that made Iran dangerous in Hormuz was still there. The coastline didn't disappear. The tunnels didn't collapse overnight. Missile systems, mobile ones, don't sit still waiting to be targeted. They move, they hide, they reappear. And drones, even harder. Cheap, replaceable, launchable from multiple points. You can destroy a launcher. You can't destroy the concept. So the fight shifted from sea to land. And that's where things slow down. Because hitting ships is linear. Find, target, destroy. Hitting underground infrastructure is something else entirely. You need persistent surveillance signal analysis pattern. Recognition, repeated confirmation, then a strike. And even then, you're not always sure what you destroyed. A bunker collapses. Was it active, empty, decoy? Iran has had decades to build redundancy into the system. Multiple sites, backup communications, dispersed assets. You don't win that quickly. You grind it down. Pre-Timed. Meanwhile, the strait itself sat in a strange state. Not fully closed, not truly open. American warships moved into escort roles. Tankers lined up behind them. Slow convoys, tight formations, radar screens lit, air defense systems active. Crews at higher alert levels than usual. It's not normal traffic, it's controlled passage. And even then, risk doesn't disappear. It just gets managed. Some ships still avoided the route entirely. Others moved only after quiet negotiations. Flags mattered now. Nationality mattered. Some vessels broadcast their identity loudly, almost aggressively. Others stayed still, because at this stage, Hormuz wasn't just geography, it was a filter. And not everyone passed through it the same way. And then there were the mines. This part almost changed everything. Sea mines are slow weapons, patient, invisible. You don't see them coming. You find them when it's too late. If Iran had fully deployed them across the strait, this crisis wouldn't be measured in days. It would stretch into months, maybe years. Clearing mines is one of the hardest naval tasks. Slow sweeps, high risk. One mistake and a ship is gone. So the US prioritized those vessels early, the ones capable of laying mines. Track them, hit them. 16 vessels removed before they could complete deployment. That decision doesn't get headlines, but it matters more than most of the visible strikes, because it prevented a long war from becoming a permanent blockade. So, step back and look at the sequence. Iran tried to weaponize uncertainty. Instead, it triggered escalation faster than it could control. The US removed the visible layer of the threat quickly, but the invisible layer remains. And that's where this story stops being fast. What happened here goes beyond Iran, beyond Hormuz, beyond even the immediate military campaign. It exposed a hard truth that a lot of governments already know, but don't like saying out loud. Threatening global trade is easier than controlling the consequences once trade actually breaks. Iran thought it could squeeze the world, raise prices, split Western governments, and force concessions through economic pain. That part was not crazy. In fact, it was one of the few parts of the strategy that made sense. Hormuz is a pressure point. Everyone knows it, but pressure points cut both ways. The moment Iran widened the target set, civilian vessels, neutral shipping, anything moving through the corridor, it stopped looking like a calculated denial strategy and started looking reckless. And once you look reckless in a choke point that feeds the global economy, countries stop asking whether they agree with your politics. They start asking how fast they can contain you. That is the first lesson. Geography is not power by itself. It is only power if you can control escalation. If you cannot, geography turns into a trap. You end up fighting in a place your enemy has been planning around for decades. The second lesson is even more uncomfortable. A navy can be destroyed faster than a military problem can be solved. That's the illusion people fall for when they watch the opening phase of a campaign. Ships burn, ports explode. Satellite images show blackened docks and wrecks half submerged at anchor. It looks decisive. It looks finished. It isn't. Because in the modern Middle East, the most dangerous systems are often the ones you can't put in a photograph. Buried launchers, mobile missile batteries, drones packed into warehouses, fiber-linked command posts inside mountains. Those don't disappear when surface vessels go down. And that means the first victory can create a second, harder war. A slower one, less visible, more expensive. This is where people get fooled by the aesthetics of power. Carrier groups are spectacular. Strike footage is spectacular. A submarine intercept in the Indian Ocean sends a brutal message. Yes, but none of that changes the basic reality of asymmetric warfare. If a state has had years to dig in, disperse, and build redundancy, then punishment alone rarely ends the danger. It suppresses, it degrades, sometimes heavily. But eliminate, that word gets used too easily. There's another lesson here, and it matters well beyond Tehran. Control of the sea is still one of the clearest forms of hard power on Earth. When Iranian ships tried to flee and were found anyway, when routes across the Indian Ocean failed to provide safety, that wasn't just a battlefield result. It was a strategic broadcast to every regional navy, to every state that relies on distance as a shield, to every planner who still thinks open water means room to disappear. It doesn't. Not against a power with layered surveillance, submarines in position, and the political will to act. But even that lesson comes with an asterisk, because sea control does not automatically produce political control. You can reopen shipping lanes, you can escort tankers, you can destroy fleets and sink logistics chains, and force hostile vessels into foreign ports. All of that is real. All of it matters. And still, the political problem remains standing. Iran's regime does not vanish because its fleet is crippled. Its proxy relationships do not vanish. The Houthis do not vanish. The logic of retaliation does not vanish. The grievances that fed this confrontation do not vanish. That is the deeper danger in this entire episode. Not that the world saw a navy broken in days, but that many people will mistake that for resolution. It isn't resolution, it's transition. The conflict has simply moved from ships and sea lanes into a longer contest of surveillance, strike cycles, replacement networks, covert logistics, diplomatic pressure, and sheer endurance. And that kind of conflict has a way of outlasting headlines. Later that same week, another tanker edged into the strait behind a U.S. destroyer. Slow, careful, radar spinning, crew lined along the rail, watching the coastline pass by. Those same cliffs, those same shadows where things could still be hiding. No one said it out loud, but everyone on that deck understood something had changed. The ships were moving again, yes, but not the way they used to. What happened in those few days didn't just break a fleet. It reset expectations about risk, about control, about how quickly a calculated move can spiral when too many variables snap at once. Iran made a bet, not a foolish one on paper, but one that depended on discipline, precision, and timing. It lost control of all three. And once that happened, the response wasn't gradual. It was overwhelming. That's the part people focus on. The speed, the scale, the destruction. But that's not the real ending. Because the strait isn't fully safe. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. The missiles aren't all gone. The networks aren't all exposed. And the political core of this conflict, what drove it in the first place, is still intact, still active, still adapting. So the question isn't whether the first phase is over. It is. The question is what comes next. How long can pressure be sustained before something slips again? How many hidden systems are still out there waiting? And how many times can the world afford to run this close to a choke point before the next miscalculation isn't contained? Because next time, there may not be enough room to recover. And in a place like Hormuz, there's never much room to begin with.